Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She stood still, tiny boots planted firmly on the concrete, her silhouette dwarfed by the hangars and the men around her. The Fort Braxton air buzzed with distant rotor blades and laughter from the Family Day Fair. But she didn't laugh, didn't move. She just waited. A little girl, 10 years old, maybe 4 feet tall, not lost, not playing, not clinging to her parents like the others, just standing, watching. Her name was Sarah Chun. No one noticed the way her fingers rested at her sides, like they were meant to grip a rifle, or the tJudgeByLooks rifle, or the way she squinted toward the firing range, as if calculating distance. Wind light, not daydreaming, processing. Sir, I want to shoot. The words cut through the air and fell sharp against the ears of Colonel Marcus Webb, a 30-year veteran. Hardened by 3 tours, his chest heavy with ribbons that spoke of valor and loss. He looked down at the girl like someone had cracked a joke, laughed, loud, dismissive. The kind of laugh used on kids who say they want to fly jets or command submarines. Sweetheart, he chuckled. These aren't water guns. Go find the face painting booth with the other kids. He waved her away, but she didn't move. She just stared at him, still, calm, eyes dark, focused, silent. Her boots didn't shuffle. Her shoulders didn't slump. She didn't even blink. It was unsettling. Webb had stood toe-to-toe with Afghan warlords, corrupt generals, and grieving mothers. But something about this child made the back of his neck tighten. From the corner of his eye, he noticed the SEALs Rodriguez, Jackson, watching now, their mock combat drills forgotten. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. They were trained to read situations, and this one felt wrong. I said no, little lady. Webb barked, this time with authority. This is serious military equipment, not toys. Your parents should be. She reached into her backpack. Not suddenly, not threatening. Calmly, smoothly. Military grade. Pack, Webb noted without thinking, and from it, she pulled a phone. Sir, she said, her voice measured, without defiance. With respect. I think you should see this first. Webb almost rolled his eyes, until the video started. He leaned closer, and the world seemed to tilt. A little girl, maybe 7, on a shooting range. Alone, controlled youth model rifle braced into her shoulder. Shot after shot. Tight, precise. Hole after hole. All center mass. All within a coin-sized grouping at 50 yards. Webb knew exactly what that meant. Most soldiers took months, years, to reach that level of accuracy. Some never did. This wasn't casual backyard shooting. This was methodical, disciplined. His mouth went dry. Where was this taken? Quantico, Sarah said flatly. Every weekend. My grandfather says practice makes permanent, not perfect. So we practice perfect. Whispers rippled through the watching SEALs. Quantico wasn't a casual name to throw around. It was sacred ground. For marksmen, Webb's assumptions were cracking under the weight of her gaze. One shot, he said finally, quietly. Miss. And you're done. She nodded. No hesitation, no smile, just, thank you, sir. And the air changed. Morrison scrambled to adjust the rifle for her size. The crowd grew. The wind stilled. Even the helicopters seemed to quiet. Sarah stepped forward, toward the firing line, carrying the weapon with the same casual precision a pianist might approach a Steinway. Rodriguez leaned into Jackson. This is either going to be embarrassing or legendary. There was no middle ground now. Sarah set her stance, shoulder width. Stable, natural. Webb squinted. Her posture wasn't just good. It was textbook. Better than textbook. Her breathing, controlled. Her trigger discipline. Flawless. No tension, no fidgeting, no tells. Master Chief Patterson, silent at the back of the crowd, murmured, "That's not luck. That's muscle memory." She inhaled, half exhale, held her breath at the pause, squeezed. Crack. The sound echoed like a verdict. Silence. Then someone peered through the spotting scope. Slowly, carefully, dead center. Not near it. Not close, dead center. That's a 10-ring center punch, Jackson whispered. His voice cracked on the last word. Webb didn't speak, couldn't, and Sarah lowered the rifle, smooth and controlled. Safety on. Stepped back and said, "That was my warm-up shot, sir. May I continue?" The sentence landed like a hammer. Warm-up. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. And Webb, a man who had survived ambushed and buried friends, realized this moment would outlive his career. Because something profound had just happened. Something that didn't fit inside the box of logic and rules and rank. The girl was a shooter, a real one, and she wasn't done yet. What did she see through the scope that made even the SEALs hold their breath? Sarah stepped to the 100-yard line like she'd done it 100 times before. Because she had. The crowd behind her had grown. Not in noise, in silence. SEALs, Marines, instructors, all standing shoulder to shoulder, watching a child move like a trained operative. The usual banter had stopped. Phones were out. But no one was recording casually. This felt like a secret unfolding. A legend being born. She adjusted the modified rifle to her frame. Fingers moved with calm certainty. The way she tucked it into her shoulder, checked the scope, tested the weight. It was choreography. Beautiful. Precise and deadly. Colonel Webb's arms crossed tighter. He didn't know what disturbed him more, that she was doing it, or that she was doing it better than half his unit ever had. Rodriguez exhaled. "She's not nervous?" Jackson nodded. "Because she's not guessing. She's done this a lot." The air felt tighter. The sun bore down. And still, Sarah was frozen in that focused stillness. Then another shot, crack. Webb didn't need the spotter this time. Bullseye, same spot. Another one, and another. She wasn't just consistent. She was exact. Groupings like that. Patterson murmured, "You don't see that at 100 yards unless you're using a vice mount." But Sarah was breathing, blinking, living, just not reacting. And somehow, that was the most unsettling thing of all. She moved to 200 yards without a word. No cheers, no praise, no acknowledgement of what she had just done. Because to her it wasn't impressive. It was expected. And that quiet standard of excellence? That scared them more than any celebration would have. At 200 yards, the world got smaller. Mirage effects, light distortion, heat shimmer. Even the best marksmen adjusted for these things, and they still got it wrong. But Sarah didn't adjust. Like a student, she analyzed like a scientist. She crouched low, eyes scanning the rippling field. Dust trails, grass blades, mirage lines in the distance. She saw what others ignored, interpreted what most barely noticed. Rodriguez leaned in. "She's reading the mirage pattern." Patterson stiffened, like a sniper instructor. Again. That feeling like they weren't watching a child, like they were watching something built for this. Sarah exhaled, fired, hit again. 5 rounds, 1 grouping. Quarter-size spread. Webb felt it in his chest. He'd trained killers, trained heroes, seen what obsession and grief and war could do to men. But this was something else. The silence behind him was louder than a firefight. Everyone was feeling the same thing, and no one dared say it. She moved to 300, still calm, still mechanical, and the voice in Webb's mind, the voice that usually predicted outcomes, read men, controlled chaos, was silent now. He had nothing. Sarah adjusted for wind drift now. Complex math, instinctive for her. She adjusted her scope one final time. Settled, weighted, crack, perfect hit. Then 4 more. The cluster was impossibly tight. Impossible, Jackson whispered. But it wasn't. It was right there on the scope. On the board, 300 yards, 100%, mechanical precision. She turned, calmly, to Webb. "May I attempt the stress course, sir?" And Webb almost said no. Not because she couldn't do it, because he was afraid of what it would mean if she could. He nodded. God help them all. He nodded. What happens when a child walks into a course designed to break grown men? 20 minutes later, Sarah stood at the start of the stress course. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was reverence. The crowd had tripled, off-duty soldiers, base staff, even admin officers leaning from windows. Rumors were spreading like fire across Fort Braxton. Not just that a girl was shooting, but that she was rewriting the definition of precision. And now, she was about to enter the crucible. The stress course. Multiple targets. Varying distances, moving threats, simulated combat stress. It was a gauntlet meant to overwhelm, confuse, and break a shooter's rhythm. Most elite operators required a dozen attempts before scoring above 80%. Sarah hadn't blinked. Rodriguez folded his arms. "This is where it ends." Patterson didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the girl. Squinting like he was seeing something no one else could, Webb stood still, arms behind his back, silent now. Humbled, even a little afraid of what came next. The whistle blew. Sarah ran. She moved with surprising speed, not fast, not sloppy. Efficient. Her rifle swayed across her back. Secure. First target, 150 yards. Partial exposure. She hit it while still lowering to the prone position. Crack. Hit. Second. Steel plate. High angle. Crack. Center third. Lateral motion. 2-second window. Crack. Hit. Each time, she adjusted position, recalculated angles, adapted. Her eyes never darted. Her breathing never spiked. The crowd forgot to breathe entirely. "She's not reacting," Jackson said slowly. "She's predicting. Fourth target, 2-shot requirement, 1 moving, 1 stationary." She tagged them both in under 4 seconds. 5th, 6th, 7th, all clean. At the halfway point, Rodriguez shook his head. "She's not just passing. She's setting records." At 400 yards, she took cover behind a concrete barrier, firing from an unsteady crouch, adjusting between angles like she'd rehearsed the course for years. But no one had trained her for this. That's what made it surreal. No one had ever trained her for this. She was just doing it, and doing it better than they ever had. Morrison leaned over to Webb, his notebook trembling. "Sir, we're going to need to rewrite the scorecard system?" Webb didn't answer. He couldn't, because something inside him, that old pride, that certainty, was collapsing, crumbling under the weight of a truth he hadn't expected to confront today. A truth in the shape of a child. As Sarah finished the course, she paused at the final station, a 500-yard shot, elevated, wind swirl conditions. Moving target. Only instructors were expected to attempt it. She sighted in, adjusted for wind. Factored for delay crack, the steel plate rang direct hit. Then the buzzer sounded. Course complete. Time. Record breaking. Accuracy. Perfect. Score. Beyond maximum. Someone whispered. She broke the board. Another added. She broke the damn system. But Sarah simply walked back to her starting point, disengaged the rifle safety, and placed it down gently, as if it were something sacred. Then she stood at attention, waiting. Webb approached, slowly. The numbers didn't lie, but the disbelief hadn't faded. He turned to Morrison. "Confirm it." Morrison nodded. 3 times, sir. The system won't even register a score that high without a software override. She didn't just pass. She obliterated the top seal record by 15 points. 15. Webb felt the word sink into his spine like a knife. He turned to Sarah. She was calm, focused, not smiling. This wasn't a game to her. It never had been. And suddenly, he needed to know why. Who was the man walking toward her? And why did every soldier suddenly fall silent? The crowd parted without a word. No orders, no commands, just instinct, respect. The man who approached moved with a quiet authority that made the air feel heavier. Tall, silver-haired, lean like a rifle barrel. He walked straight and slow. Not because he was old, but because he didn't need to rush for anyone. His face was lined, not with age, but with memory, with scope glare and battlefield dust. His presence shifted the energy on the range more than Sarah's shot had. Webb blinked, and recognition hit him like recoil. "Master Sergeant James Chun," he said, his voice low, reverent. A ripple ran through the crowd. Not murmurs, silence, because everyone knew the name. A Marine sniper with a kill count sealed. In redacted files, 3 tours in Vietnam, Medal of Honor, instructor to legends. His reputation didn't spread through the news. It lived in whispered stories between generations of soldiers. A ghost who had once aimed through a scope and changed the course of firefights without ever stepping into the light. And here he was, walking toward the girl. Sarah didn't move, didn't smile, but her eyes softened, just a little, and Webb understood. Of course, the precision, the discipline, the impossible calm. This wasn't chance. This was heritage. "She's been training since she could hold a rifle," James said quietly, stepping beside her. His voice was gravel, but steady, a tone born from decades of shouting through chaos. Every ear strained to catch his words. "She lost her parents 3 years ago. Car crash. It landed like a gut punch. Every soldier present had faced loss. Friends, comrades, brothers. But something about hearing it like that, with her so still beside him, broke something in the air." "Her father," James continued, "was Staff Sergeant Michael Chung. Marine sniper, 2nd generation. Her mother, Dr. Lisa Chun, combat trauma surgeon. 2 tours in Afghanistan." The pieces slid together with painful clarity. She didn't just lose her family, James said, voice nearly a whisper now. She lost her world, her anchor, her heartbeat. Sarah's hands stayed at her sides, unshaking. "Since then," James went on, "she's trained every weekend. Quantico, backyard, rain or shine. 6 hours a day, over 100,000 rounds." Someone inhaled sharply behind Webb. 100,000. That was more than most. Special Forces shooters logged in entire careers. "She shoots," James said, his weathered fingers unconsciously mimicking a grip, "because it's the only way she still hears him." No one dared speak, not even the SEALs. Sarah's eyes stayed. Forward, her voice finally came, soft but steady. "My father said precision wasn't just hitting the target," she said. "It was about honoring the moment, staying calm when everything else breaks, trusting the silence." Webb looked at her, really looked. This wasn't talent. This was grief, distilled into discipline, pain, alchemized into precision, not obsession. Purpose. He dropped to a knee, bringing himself to her eye level. His tone different now, not commanding, not questioning, just respectful. "Young lady," he said, voice rough, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you a future." She blinked, for the first time. She blinked. "How would you like to train with the best marksman in the world?" he asked. Sarah didn't smile, didn't hesitate. "When do we start, sir?" And right then, as the scoreboard still blinked its impossible numbers, Fort Braxton witnessed something rare. Not the rise of a prodigy, but the rebirth of a warrior. Why did the Pentagon call before sunset? Colonel Webb hadn't moved, not even after Sarah walked off the range. Not even after the crowd finally began to scatter, whispering legends before they'd even finished processing what they'd seen. He stood in front of the scoreboard, the impossible numbers still glowing in red LED to 100%. Stress course. New record. Score. +15. He'd asked the techs to verify it 3 times. They had. The system hadn't glitched. The girl hadn't cheated. Nothing had malfunctioned. Everything about this was real, and nothing in his 3 decades of service had prepared him for it. "Sir," Morrison said, quietly approaching, holding a clipboard filled with ballistic readouts and performance data. "Pentagon's already heard." Someone posted a clip. It's gone viral on base networks. Webb didn't flinch. She'll be on the global training radar by morning. Morrison added, but Webb wasn't thinking about morning. He was thinking about something deeper, something harder to admit, that he had laughed at her, that he had tried to dismiss her, that if she hadn't shown him the video, he might have sent her away with a smile and a candy bar and never known what humanity had nearly overlooked. He felt sick, a familiar, slow-burning guilt only known to veterans who've survived while others didn't. A guilt that says, you should have seen it sooner. Behind him, the firing range was being reset, but no one dared touch the target board. Sarah had used, it stood untouched, a near-sacred artifact of the day everything changed. And then Morrison's radio crackled. Sir, Command Center, patch from DC Direct. Webb's jaw clenched already. He turned slowly and walked toward the secure line inside the main operations tent. Every step felt heavier than the last. When the secure feed opened, it wasn't a general on the screen. It was someone far higher. I've seen the footage. The voice said, flat and sharp. So of half the Joint Chiefs. Webb stood straight. Sir, you were right to let her fire. You were wrong to laugh. Webb didn't respond. He didn't need to. Does she know what she is? The voice asked. Webb hesitated. No, sir. She only knows what she's lost. There was a long silence on the line then. We need to protect her, not just because of her skill, but because skill like that changes doctrine, if that kind of clarity can be taught, understood, replicated. The voice didn't finish the sentence. It didn't need to. Webb spoke softly. She's not a weapon. Sir, no, the voice replied. She's the proof we've been looking for. The next evolution. A marksman who doesn't break under pressure, because pressure is all she's ever known. The call ended without further instruction, but Webb knew what it meant. The military machine had seen her, and it would never unsee her. Outside, Sarah sat alone on the edge of the range, her rifle beside her, dismantled and cleaned. The barrel gleamed in the fading light. James Chun stood nearby, silent, watching, not guarding her, respecting her space, because he knew what was happening inside her head. Not joy, not pride, just stillness. That dangerous. Quiet stillness only people who've lost everything can maintain. He finally spoke, his voice low. You know what comes next? She nodded once. They would come. Scientists, trainers, psychologists, everyone would want to test, to understand, to pull apart the thing that had stunned seasoned warriors into silence. But none of them would understand. She didn't shoot because it was fun. She shot because it was all she had left, all she could control. Her aim was her answer to a world that had taken too much, and she would protect that purpose with everything she had, even from the ones who wanted to help. What happens when a legend spreads faster than command can contain it? By dawn, her name was everywhere. Sarah Chun, not just whispered around Fort Braxton anymore. It had leaked beyond the wire, across group chats in Quantico, among instructors, in sniper schools from Pendleton to Benning, and even further, private defense channels, Olympic shooting forums, law enforcement ranges. And with every retelling, the story got simpler, sharper, colder. She broke the SEAL record at 10. She shot a perfect 300-yard group on her first attempt. She took the stress course like she was taking a stroll. The truth didn't need embellishment. It was the embellishment inside the base's administrative wing. Colonel Webb stared at a growing stack of email printouts. Requests, dozens, training invites, psychological evaluations, sponsorship offers, high-ranking officials from 3 branches wanted a briefing. Even an Olympic shooting recruiter had sent an informal inquiry. We understand she's below the age bracket, but perhaps an exception could be made. He didn't know what to do with any of it. He hadn't slept, not because of the pressure, but because of what Sarah had said after the course. Just one sentence stuck in his head like a stuck round in a jam chamber. He said, "You shoot. To honor the moment, not to win it. Webb had spent 30 years training warriors to win. At any cost, fastest, strongest, most efficient. But this girl, this child, she wasn't wired for that. She didn't aim for trophies. She aimed for silence, for peace. She shot because it was the only time her mind stopped hurting, and that made her the most dangerous kind of soldier, because she couldn't be motivated or controlled by the usual levers. At the chow hall, Sarah sat with James' chum. Their tray sat untouched. Not because they weren't hungry, but because everything had shifted. A pair of soldiers passed, slowing down just enough to glance over. Not out of curiosity, out of awe. It wasn't malicious. But Sarah noticed. She always noticed. Her grandfather didn't speak until they were gone. "You don't belong in their stories," he said quietly. She turned toward him. "You don't need their cameras, their curiosity, their praise." "I didn't ask for it," she said. "I know," he replied. "That's why it's coming." Another silence stretched between them. She finally said, "Are they going to use me?" He exhaled. "I think they'll try." Sarah nodded once, but her eyes didn't harden. They didn't need to. She already knew something they didn't. You couldn't train what she had. You couldn't replicate it, because it came from loss, from rage buried so deep it had calcified into silence, from firing 100,000 rounds just to feel like you existed again. You can't teach that. You can't program that. And if they tried to use her, to dissect her like a lab experiment or display her like a miracle, they'd fail. Because she wasn't aiming for their medals. She was aiming for something much harder to earn control over herself. Later that day, Colonel Webb walked the length of the shooting range again. Alone, no crowd, no laughter. Just the ghost of a legend barely 24 hours old. And as he reached the far end of the range, past the 300-yard line, past the broken score records and shattered assumptions, he found her, lying in prone, alone, practicing again. No cameras, no orders, just her and the wind. She didn't look up, didn't speak, just fired. Crack, bullseye, another, crack, dead center, like it was breathing. Webb just stood there and felt his pride give way to something deeper, not admiration, but humility, because this wasn't the story he controlled anymore. This was hers, and she wasn't finished writing it, not even close. What do you do when the world tries to own your pain? By the end of the week, Fort Braxton was no longer just a base. It was a shrine. Media requests had been denied, officially, but that didn't stop the chatter. Defense contractors began, circling like wolves, offering scholarships, grants, special programs. Psychology departments from Ivy League schools reached out with case study proposals. A think tank from Langley even offered to support her transition into advanced tactical aptitude analysis. They didn't see a girl, they saw a phenomenon, and in every email, one thing was clear. They wanted to study her or train her or claim her. But no one, not one of them, wanted to ask the question Webb couldn't stop hearing in his own mind. What if she doesn't want to be part of your system? What if she just wants peace? Sarah sat on the range again that morning. Same posture, same routine, rifle cleaned and reassembled before every session. Her grandfather sat behind her now. Never hovering, just present. She had fired 43 rounds since sunrise. Every one a bullseye. Everyone whispering a message that no one else could hear. Webb approached carefully. She heard his boots long before he spoke. "You know what's coming," he said, stopping 5 feet behind her. "I always knew," she replied. "They'll offer you everything. They'll take more." He nodded grim. "I spent my whole career building the system. They now want to use on you," Webb admitted. "But I've never seen it handle someone like you." "That's because I didn't come from it." Her voice wasn't angry. It was just true. "I wasn't built to serve it. I was built to survive it." He let that hang in the air. She continued. "Every time I pull the trigger, I don't feel powerful. I feel quiet. It's the only time I don't miss him." Webb's throat tightened. Sarah didn't need applause. She didn't even want it. She wanted the silence between heartbeats, the stillness between breaths. The sacred second before the trigger breaks and everything makes sense, just for a moment. She didn't shoot to impress the world. She shot to remember the person who taught her. And now the world was trying to steal that from her, in the name of honor. Excellence training. But she knew you don't owe your grief to anyone. Not even your country. The following day, the Pentagon's representative arrived. A civilian suit, clipboard smile too polished. Webb watched from his office as the man approached Sarah like she was a science project, but she saw it coming. She stood straightened, saluted politely, and listened for 7 minutes. The man spoke. About opportunity, about the future, about exceptionalism. She didn't interrupt. She didn't nod. She didn't speak when he finished. She asked one question. What are you offering me that I don't already have? He blinked. What? Do you mean? She pointed to the range. My piece lives there. Sarah, we can offer you so much more. No, she said softly. You can offer me more noise. I'm not interested in noise. He left 10 minutes later, confused, frustrated, and carrying the stench of rejection for the first time in his career. Webb didn't speak to Sarah. After he didn't need to, she had drawn the line, and done so with the kind of grace and authority it took most soldiers a lifetime to find. How does a legend end? It doesn't. It just disappears into silence. Sarah Chum left Fort Braxton 2 weeks later. No ceremony, no press, no honor guard or parade. Just a quiet morning, her rifle in its case, her grandfather beside her, and the wind behind them, carrying the memory of every shot she'd fired on that range. Colonel Webb stood at the gate as they passed. He didn't salute. He bowed his head, not out of protocol, out of respect, because he'd realized something. None of the reports or generals had understood. She didn't come here to be discovered. She came here to grieve, and now that her grief had spoken, now that it had carved itself into military folklore, she didn't need to stay. She had nothing left to prove, and nothing anyone could offer her would replace what she'd already lost. Months passed, then a year, but her name never faded among SEALs. She became a cautionary tale. Don't underestimate what silence might be hiding. Among sniper schools, she was myth. She hit a 5-shot dime group at 300 yards. Her first time out, and among commanders, she was a whisper, a lesson, a reckoning. Greatness doesn't need our permission. It only needs space. No one knew where she went after Fort Braxton. Some said she moved to Virginia. Others said she trained in the Rockies. One rumor claimed the CIA made an offer, and she never responded. But Webb never searched. He just kept a photo. Not of her on the range. Not the scoreboard. Not the moment the bullet struck dead center. Just one image. A still frame from the security camera at the gate. Sarah Chun walking away. Boots in sync with her grandfather's, a rifle case swung over her shoulder, back straight, head high. Years later, an instructor at Fort Benning would tell a new class of recruits. Sometimes the best shooters don't raise their voices. They don't chase records. They don't ask to be seen. They just wait until someone laughs, then teach us everything we forgot about dignity. Because that was her story, not of a prodigy, not of a miracle, but of a girl who had lost everything and used silence, discipline, and perfect precision to rebuild a world only she could live in, and in doing so, she reminded the rest of us. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.